Good afternoon and welcome back. I'm Marcus Peter. From Iceland to the wider West, falling birth rates and the elimination of the unfit have been revealing to us a civilization that's undermining its own future as a culture of death, committing suicide. We're joined by Joseph Pearce. Joseph wears many hats. He's a visiting professor and visiting fellow of at least 2 institutions, author of more than 30 books. But most of all, he is a thinker in terms of the scriptures, the teachings of the church, literature, and the culture. His personal website is jpearce.co. Greatly encourage all of you to sign up and subscribe to keep up with his work. Joseph, great to speak with you. How are you?
I'm doing well, Marcus. Thanks for having me.
Always a joy to reconnect with you. So let's talk about the culture of death. From its genesis, it was always doomed to be the source of its own destruction. I know that's abstract, but I wonder if we could begin there.
Yes, indeed. I think sometimes we sort of look at the power of the dark forces that are lined up against the forces of good and against the church, and some of us at least are sort of tempted to sort of despair or at least despondency. But what we forget is that evil carries within itself the seeds of its own destruction. So you don't actually have to worry about destroying evil, because evil is in the process of destroying itself. You just have to have the courage of your own convictions to follow the good and to become a disciple of Christ and let the culture of life thrive while the culture of death basically decays and dies.
Tell us about what the culture of... When we use the term culture of death, we mean a particular spirit and ideology amongst especially the West, but the general global populace. Share with us what that means.
Yeah, I mean, unless I'm mistaken, Marcus, and I'm sure you can correct me, I think the phrase was coined by St. John Paul II. That two of my favorite phrases that sort of summarize the state of the modern world were by Pope St. John Paul II and Pope Benedict XVI. So St. John Paul II talked about the culture of death, and Benedict XVI talked about the dictatorship of relativism. And one goes hand in hand with the other. You could even say that one has caused the other. But basically, the culture of death is about where we're proud of our pride. Pride is the label that we affix to ourselves. It replaces humility. And the thing about pride is, instead of laying down our lives for others, we lay down the lives of others for ourselves. It's about self-empowerment, about doing our own thing. And, of course, that plays itself out in all sorts of ways, not least in the way in which mothers destroy their own children.
And it doesn't, like you mentioned, it doesn't just isolate itself to the abortion question. We've branched into euthanasia, assisted suicide, and now, frankly, individuals seeking to destroy themselves.
Yeah, well, basically what we find across Western Europe in general now, and across the so-called developed world, we might say overdeveloped, as in festering and decaying, that what we actually find are falling birth rates. So we have, in addition to abortion and eugenics, so killing the young, culling the old, we have an unwillingness to be open to life, so the contraceptive culture. Now that basically means that we'll have an economy and a culture which will become unsustainable very quickly. We can plug the gap, so to speak, by encouraging migration from other parts of the world. But of course, when in the case of Iceland, which we talk about in the article, that the indigenous population of Iceland are likely to be a minority within 3 or 4 decades. So the point is all sorts of social and cultural and political upheaval that goes with that solution, and it's only a temporary solution to the problems that the culture of death caused.
Tell us about what has happened in some European nations, in particular nations like Iceland.
Yeah, so that I in this particular article for the National Catholic Register, I isolate Iceland, so to speak, as a microcosmic example of what's happening throughout the rest of Europe. But it's basically that they boast, and I think they even use the word final solution. They boast of the final solution to the problem of children with Down syndrome, and that final solution is widespread screening during pregnancy and the extermination of every child with that disability that is discovered. And only 2 children with were born with Down syndrome in Iceland last year, because that's the final solution: exterminate them before they have the opportunity to see the light of day.
We're not that far removed from the Second World War, but for some reason we don't see the irony that's before us. How do we not see that this is a kind of new Holocaust?
Yeah, well, people forget actually that Margaret Sanger and the pioneers of Planned Parenthood were allied to the Nazis. They actually went to Nazi Germany to see what the Nazis were doing about sterilizing disabled people, so they couldn't reproduce disabled people, and approving of that. And so that there was this, if you like, unholy alliance between the pioneers of Planned Parenthood, the culture of death, if you like, in the 21st century that we now experience, and the culture of death in the Third Reich in Nazi Germany. In both cases, it's about exterminating those which we feel are not worthy of life.
This terrible language of those not worthy of life, or dare I say it, unfit to live, there's a real Nietzschean Übermensch quality about it. And so what has modern philosophy and ideology done for good in human society?
Yeah, well, basically what we see is how bad ideas have bad consequences. We obviously saw how the ideas of Karl Marx and Friedrich Engels and the Communist Manifesto and Das Kapital played itself out in the 20th century with a number of communist revolutions that led to tens of millions of people being slaughtered on the altar of ideology. But we also saw it in Nazi Germany, and the Nazis were certainly greatly influenced by the philosophy of Nietzsche. You mentioned the word the Übermensch, the Superman, the Overman, the master race. But if you like, the dark underbelly of this belief in the Übermensch, the Superman or the master race, is the Untermensch, the subhuman, the underman, the one who is not worthy to live, and the Übermensch has the right to do what he likes with him. That's the philosophy that the Nazis inherited from the philosophy of Nietzsche.
Can you also speak to the fact that most people who ascribe to this ideology, they guise it under a vitriolic version of compassion? It's like a kind of toxic empathy, if you will.
Well, I mean, certainly it's correct virtue signaling. It's virtue signaling to ourselves to convince ourselves that the lives that we're exterminating would be better off being dead. Well, that makes us feel better, but it might be quite good if they'd actually allowed the person they're killing to have a say in the matter.
You're completely right. And yet again, this is irony that's lost on us. And so they are, for ascribers to the movement and the ideology, they are becoming the authors of their own shrinking and demise.
Yes, indeed. I think I begin the article for the National Catholic Register by using that famous saying, which we've all heard: if you give the devil enough rope, he'll hang himself. The devil, but the point is to hang you first, and it certainly hangs his own disciples. And that's why the culture of death is self-destructive. Of course, the suicide rate amongst those who advocate pride as their principal philosophy is much higher than it is amongst the general population. Because if you make yourself God of your own microcosmos, that's a shriveling, shrinking cosmos. You golemize yourself. It's a pretty lonely, unhappy place to be if you won't open your heart and your mind to others. So, so basically this is the path to despair. And I think it's one of the reasons we've had so many adult conversions to Catholicism throughout Europe and indeed the United States. I think that people, and particularly young people, are beginning to see that this self-idolization, this self-empowerment to the point of self-deification is a path to suicidal despondency and despair, and they're recoiling in horror from being hanged by the devil that they've been following into the arms of Holy Mother Church and Jesus Christ.
I guess the saddest part about all of this is even those who move down the path of self-destruction do so with a false sense of self-actualization and happiness, and that makes it all the more perverse. Joseph, thank you very much for making the time to speak with us about this.
My pleasure, Marcus. God bless you.
I've been talking to my friend Joseph Pearce, visiting professor of literature at Ave Maria University, who wears a lot of hats, but I want to draw you to his personal website, jpearce.co. Do subscribe, find out what he's doing, and keep in touch. Stay tuned, I'm Marcus Peter.